Hello and welcome to For Fuck's Sake. My name is Rob Hayes. We've got Pete and Tom with us this Thursday evening for a show that we are calling The Preview, but he's going to discuss a few other wider things around Leicester City, and we'll get Pete's excuses as to why we've not had a podcast on these before in a couple of moments. For those of you watching live, you'll see that Pete Selby has got Milan 2026 as his little tagline. I'll let him explain that in a moment. So this is, if you're tuning in for the first time, this is a Leicester City podcast that is part of a wider structure of For Fuck's Sake, where we are website based for foxsake.news. Subscriptions to our website are just £5 a month, and you can read in great depth our opinions on the goings on at Leicester City. You can, as recently as today, you can see the latest installment of our Where Are They Now features with Darren Kenton. Andy Moore spoke to Darren recently and caught up with him about his time at Leicester and what he's up to these days. There's a roundup of the latest appearances in international football for Leicester City's women's players. Loads and loads of stuff on there, and plenty about the recent news of the evolved leadership structure. I have to say it as robotically as it sounds in the publications from the club. That we're going to talk about. It's emerged today that Harry Winks is not out of contract this summer, as many of us believe. So we will also be covering that. And we are happy, within reason, to cover whatever you watching along live want us to cover. So please do get your comments in however you are watching this evening, and we will discuss them. Go on then, Pete, get your excuses out of the way. Why are you encroaching on my preview show to talk about Leicester City news when you should have done this a couple of days ago?
Because I went out for dinner in Milan and forgot. Yeah. But that's literally what
happened. What life are you living? Go on, Milan 2026. Yes. Fill the viewers and listeners in for those who are not up to speed with your latest career movements.
Yeah, over in Milan, covering the Paralympic Winter Games, Milan Cortina 2026. So look out for the cross country and the biathlon. That's why I'm in a hotel room. It looks a little bit like Bond Larry or something like that, or shall I say the Bond villain lair, and also just a really hot shower. So I look like I've completely red, but that's just because of that. It's not because of the sun or anything, because believe me, when you're trapped in the OBS, you don't see a lot of sun at all. So, but it just turned out that it was a day that everyone could go for dinner, and I volunteered. I said, look, this place I've been to once before around the corner. I said, really nice, and completely forgot. So I put my hands in the air and apologized to everyone. But here we are talking all things Leicester. And I've got the old shirt on as well. I'm going to go to Inter against Atalanta. Looking forward to that. Unfortunately, I come back on the same day as when Vardy plays. So I can't go and see JV, but there we go. At least I'll catch one game. And if you want to read about Italian football and go in to watch Jamie Vardy and go into the San Siro, etc., head over to fox8.news, because on fox8.news, he went last weekend and he went to go and check out. He went to see 3 games, including Vardy, etc. And I won't ruin anything because it's a really nice read on fox8.news and his European adventure. Many people have gone to watch JV play, and the latest is our very own Andy Moore. But I won't see Vardy, but I'll go to Inter Atalanta. It should be a good game.
You'll at least see some proper football, not the dross that we've been subjected to recently. Tom, good evening to you. We have got a comment in here that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, so I'm going to put it up on the screen and see if you can decipher it, because it is aimed at you. It's from Buzzer. Thank you very much for joining us and commenting live. I heard Tom is going to do a shoey on the next preview if Daka... Now, hang on. I'm just translating live now. That's got to be something to do with downing a beer out of a shoe or something, is it?
It is indeed. Mate, I'll do a shoey on any day that ends in Y. So I'll do 2 if Daka scores.
There. You heard it here first. Tom, if Daka scores against Ipswich, Tom is going to do 2 shoeys.
Well, he's never going to do it then, is he? So
that's the point.
Yeah. How much do you like your beer, Tom? Because you're probably going to have another dry month at least with Daka.
No, mate, I love a beer. I'm going through a big Guinness phase ever since I moved to the UK. I've got a mate that's mad into the Six Nations, and he's just absolutely brought me on board for it. So, no, I love a beer.
Yeah, it's illegal to watch the Six Nations without a Guinness, isn't it? Right, let's get into some big news at Leicester City. I say big news. Will it actually have any kind of sized impact on anything to do with on the pitch, off the pitch? We don't know. Basically, John Rudkin has been moved upstairs officially now and is now the chief football officer. James McCarron coming in soon-ish from the City Group as the new sporting director. He's currently global director of player development at the City Group, and also Kevin Davies is moving across from 15 years in the financial side of the business to become the CEO. So the changes that were hinted at 4 months ago are kind of here. They've happened, and the club has promised further communication with no timeline as to not necessarily what those roles will entail, but they have said that John and Kevin will be introduced in appropriate settings in the coming weeks. Now, I can't imagine for a second that an appropriate setting to unveil John Rudkin's new job is going to be at some kind of live fans forum, because the man would just get absolutely hammered. So, Pete, we'll come to you first. Your thoughts on the, hang on, let me get the official line again, the evolved leadership structure at Leicester City.
It's got rearranging deck chairs written all over it, hasn't it? It's I mean, to be perfectly honest, as long as the person is capable in that position, I don't really care who's in that position. And I think if you do, then you might have an unhealthy relationship with football, because again, if they do their job, then that's fine. The problem is the people in those positions have not been doing their job in recent years. I've got no problem with people moving around and maybe not moving sideways, but moving upwards and even changing for various reasons. Again, with David, it could well be that he's always wanted that role, or maybe it's a demotion, maybe it's promotion, maybe it's not something he wants to do. We'll just find out in the future. So overall, it's a little bit of apathy, which I think many people have. Interesting though with Rudkin, because Rudkin is the Dark Lord in all this, isn't he? Really. And I'm not a great Lord of the Rings watcher, but was that guy who had the kind of like the evil guy next to him telling him what to do, and the spell was broken, all of a sudden colour came to his cheeks and he was absolutely fine and he was king again. We're hoping that sort of thing's going to happen with Top, where Rudkin goes and all of a sudden Top bursts into life and it turns into a bit of a V-shine. Let's get it right. So overall, I'm okay with it, because as long as the improvement happens in their roles, that's all that matters. But with the Rudkin, I still hold that little percentage of chance that if things get so bad with all the protests, etc., and all that against him, does he just turn around and go, "It's not for me"? Do you know what I mean? I'm going to go. Or is it the fact that if they do get relegated, it might just be, right, you've got to go now? So because that's not really been announced, I'm still holding on to that slim chance that he might go.
Tom, do you think these changes will go any way to appeasing the unrest amongst the fans? We haven't really talked on the podcast, but we have on the website about the protest that happened on Saturday. I was there, not taking part in the protest, but actually kind of getting the footage and getting a sense of what was going on for fuck's sake. And I don't think the numbers were anywhere near what anybody was expecting. I would have, an educated guess, gone no more than 400 at its height. I don't think it was particularly cohesive in terms of any of the chanting. And myself and Joe, who's a regular on the podcast, we stood by the statue of Vichai where the protest came to a halt, and it was there for a couple of minutes chanting, and then it dispersed. So whilst I don't think the protest really showed the level of frustration that fans are communicating on social media, let's say, and in the stands as well, in terms of their displeasure at what's going on and off the pitch, but do you think these changes will do anything to improve fan mood at all?
No, I don't think it will. I mean, possibly it could be the case that once John Rudkin goes, it's a clean slate for those new bodies that have been brought into the club. But for me, and for probably a lot of people that feel very similarly, I think with John Rudkin still in the sphere of influence and having a say in terms of what goes on at the football club. I think a lot of people are still going to be really upset about that and frustrated. It kind of feels like this incredible trajectory for a career where he seems to just be failing upwards. Don't get me wrong, we've had success, obviously the FA Cup and things, but similarly, if you credit the success, you have to credit the failures as well. And for me, hey, Jono, for me, it's just the case where I'm still frustrated. I was listening to a pod, I won't commit podultery, but I was listening to another pod somewhere else that seemed to talk about how recruitment decisions are actually made within the club. And they seem to suggest that there was almost like a round table where different elements of the club, be it Rudkin, Top, and others, actually had to get together in a room and agree on a transfer for it to actually happen. And that was part of the reason why we are so slow to move in the market. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but that certainly made sense to me. And I think that if there is still this veto option for Rudkin to be involved in our transfer activity, I just don't really have faith in that process. So whilst it's great that we're bringing other people into the club to fill these roles, what oversight does John Rudkin have of their decision making and their ability to be able to operate autonomously? So if it's something like that, I think there's every reason to still be frustrated. And I think the protests, look, as for the protests themselves, I think it's a start. I think there's a lot of people that probably wanted to see how it went before committing their own actions to the cause, as it were. And I got to say, from the telly, it looked like there were a lot of seats that weren't filled at the KP. So I'm not sure what the attendance figures were like, but it did feel a bit light than it normally would be.
Yeah, it was a little bit light. And we've got Tony's commenting. Good evening, Tony. Thank you for watching along live. Tony's saying no, that's the wrong one. That's the one I wanted. Best protests are empty seats. And there are loads there for the Bristol City match. He's a season ticket holder and he won't be there. So yeah, I think you're totally right, Tom. Attendances are tailing off. I mean, you tend to see it tail off in the Championship anyway, naturally, because the sort of caliber of the opponent turning up. It is a bit of a draw for some people, regardless of how big a Leicester City fan they are, and you simply don't get that in the Championship. There are more games as well, so more people have got to be more free for those games. But I also do completely agree that the attendances are dropping off quite drastically. The fact that also that's affecting away allocations as well, because up until fairly recently it was very difficult to get hold of an away ticket to get to watch Leicester. And I've seen on the club's social media channels today that they are pushing the fact that as long as you have got 1 point, one priority point, you are now the tickets for Ipswich are now on sale to you. So they're obviously not sold out their allocation for Saturday. So yeah, I totally agree that the attendances are suffering. And also, if James McCarron is coming in from the City group, where yes, there's a big structure there, and yes, he will have lots of people to report to, but you would hope that Rudkin moving upstairs would mean he's moving upstairs into a less hands-on role, and maybe then the structure of, as you've said there, Tom, maybe the structure changes, and actually James McCarron has overarching responsibility for that. And ultimately, look, if you're a good leader, or if you're in a position of power like John Rudkin is going to be, if he has a real issue with something James McCarron's doing, fine, step in, whether I agree with what John Rudkin does and says or not. But then hopefully the rest of the time, McCarron will just be left to it, really. Let's move on and bring Jono in. Jono's just joined us this evening. Must have just finished his dinner or got rid of the kids or whatever he has to do on a Thursday evening. Jono, you can come straight in on the happy news that Harry Winks could be a Leicester City player for another year. How exciting. Jono, thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts on the Winks story coming out today, that his contract doesn't actually end this summer? It had triggered a year extension when we got promoted to the Premier League under Enzo Maresca. Are you jumping for joy, doing laps of the garden with your shirt over your head?
Evening, fellas. Yeah, it's good to be back. I just read that news actually on our WhatsApp group chat just before I logged on. I have to say probably not, frankly. I think it's time for a refresh. It's time to get rid of and start again. And it feels like Harry Winks hanging on for another year doesn't quite feel like that to me. I think what happens if we're in League One? I can't see him sticking around. I mean, the only good thing is that potentially with a year left on his contract, we can actually get some money for him in the market, because I think we should be selling him in the summer. He should leave, and we need a fresh start. So that would be my take. Yes, he's been quality in patches for us. He's showed under Enzo at this level. He's definitely, one of the better players in the league, I would suggest. But his attitude absolutely stinks, and he's let us down too many times. So I feel like it's time to get rid. And so the 1 year extension is just a bonus. The fact that we could potentially get our money back for him if we paid 8 million for him when he came in. If we can get anything like that for him on the way out, then I think that would be decent.
Yeah, I think you're right, and financially, one of the biggest, or one of the most obvious issues that we can see as supporters from the outside looking in over the last few years is the number of players that have been able to leave on a free transfer, having sort of wound down their contracts and cost Leicester City hundreds of millions of pounds in terms of just assets just disappearing. It's not the way. I know they're human beings, but it's not the way that you would run a business. You would not allow hundreds of millions of pounds worth of assets to just disappear out the back door. So actually, Winks having this extra year on the contract does mean that if he stays at Leicester next season, fine. But at least we can demand some money for him. I'm just going to go back to the comments and have another look at a couple of things on the evolved leadership structure before we get Pete and Tom's thoughts on Harry Winks. Andy Moore, for fuck's sake, saying on our poll on X at FFS Pod, surprisingly, there was 18% that either accepted Rudkin or would give him a chance. 18%. I mean, it's low statistically, but it's higher than I thought it would be, and that's, I think, what Andy is a little bit surprised by there. And Buzzer saying that my problem is Rudkin signs off on the wages. Whether he still will in that position, we don't know. But the problem isn't necessarily what the player that we get, is the ridiculous wages we give them. Yeah, and you would hope that with the reshuffling upstairs and the realization that we are at the moment far from being a Premier League team, far from generating Premier League revenue, that actually that wage structure is going to be addressed and revised. Tony also saying going to be a huge shock to the club when the season ticket renewals come around. It'll be very interesting to see numbers in that respect. Yeah. Andy Moore saying delighted with Winks staying. He loves him. Not sarcasm either. Yeah, I'm not totally sure there, Andy. Pete, Harry Winks, yay or nay?
I'm definitely not a nay. The one thing with Winks, and the surprising news for me, is that it's an extra year at the end of this year. If you get, and it's not revised terms for this season, etc. So if you think about it, it's because of winning the championship. Okay, so we won the championship, and then he had 2 years left on his contract. So the season we got relegated, this season, and now there's going to be another season because of winning the championship. So basically, we're given an extra year, or we gave an extra year to a player who still has, at the time of lifting the championship trophy, 2 years left on his contract. That for me is a bit strange, because if you were Leicester City in the Premier League and we stayed up, then the player would have had an extra year to go, and then more than likely either sign a new contract even before that, or the team would have evolved to be to go beyond a Harry Winks in the Premier League. But then if we got relegated, which we did, then surely Winks then would have given us 1 year to then bounce back. Obviously, that's not worked at all. And if it's not worked at all, then we need to get rid of him. So for me, when that clause was put in, they must have looked at the two options. One, we survive in the Premier League, we bounce back straight away, we survive in the Premier League, and he's not needed. Or secondly, we dramatically do not survive in the Premier League, which is what the case, and it all goes horribly wrong in the Championship, which has been the case, and we still wouldn't need him. So I don't understand why it was put in there in the first place, if you catch my drift. So for him staying, we've seen in a recent couple of games, he's still a very, very good midfielder. And if they want to build the side around him, if he wants to be at Leicester, if he's got a good relationship with the manager, we've seen what Winks can do in the Championship. But also we've seen what he does when he doesn't have a relationship with the manager, and that's absolutely nothing. So for me, it just depends on who comes in. If they want him, fine. If he wants to be there and he wants to play for that manager, whoever it is, fine. If not, no. And I think that's as easy as that, because when he plays, he's a very good player. But I just question the decision in the first place when we were relegated for the first time. It's a bit strange to me.
Yeah, the timing of deciding at that point to extend it that far into the future, I totally agree with you. And I'm not saying he's getting on a bit, but it's not like you're doing that for somebody who's 20, 21 and you're then trying to hold them for their prime, or even trying to hold on to them for another year in case they further develop. You know, Harry Winks is the player that he's going to be now. And like you said, and unless you are trying to stay in the Premier League or trying to win the Championship, I don't think he's that useful a player, because I think Premier League midfields have evolved since Harry Winks was any good in the Premier League. I'm not saying he couldn't do a job, but I'm not convinced that the current style of football in the Premier League would suit him. Amit's asked a question. Amit, what I'll ask you to do is, because you joined us a little bit late, just go back and watch the start of the show, because we are over 20 minutes in. It's a great question. Will anything change at Leicester with the new hirings of James McCarron, etc.? As everyone seems to now have to report to Rudkin anyway. Have a little rewind once this goes up and watch our thoughts on that at the beginning of the show. Same for anybody that's joining us. You can also have a look on forfoxsake.news to see Andy Moore's take on things as well. Just have a look and see what anybody else is saying. We'll look ahead to Leicester Ipswich in a couple of minutes, but I think we do just need to touch on how disastrously bad Saturday's game against Norwich was. So I went and I was expecting to be on the edge, filming, taking photos, talking to people on the edge of the protest and feeling really a lot of passion, a lot of atmosphere, and then walking through the turnstiles and also feeling a lot of passion and atmosphere. And I got nothing out of any of it, to be perfectly honest with you. It was the entire day, apart from going to visit my little nieces afterwards, was a complete damp squib for me. And I drove back up the M1 a bit like, didn't really feel anything today. Jono, you were the opposite from what you said in our WhatsApp group. Now, I'm not asking you to air any marital goings on the show, but just talk us through your emotions from Saturday's very, very flat 2-0 defeat to Norwich, and I guess leaning towards Saturday. Do you see a way that Leicester can turn that around in just 7 days?
Yeah, I mean, you're referencing the message I sent on the group chat that we've got. Yeah, I just felt so deflated and let down and quite depressed, frankly, after the performance on Saturday. It's probably the worst I've ever felt going to the KP and watching the team, and that's saying something after what we've seen so far this season. I think it was partly built up from my own expectations, thinking after two reasonable draws against decent opposition that maybe Rowett was getting something out of the players. And I went there with optimism, to be honest, to think that we would get a decent result. And it was the absolute opposite. Even after the protests and at the start of the game, I thought that the atmosphere in the stadium at the kickoff was as good as I've seen it for an amount of time, to be honest. It was reasonably full compared with recent times, and the crowd were definitely trying to lift the team. Certainly for the first half, that was a half decent atmosphere from where I was sitting. And I sit in the corner where the Union FS guys, just to the right of those guys. So it's probably the louder part of the stadium, probably. But even so, yeah, I felt really let down. And when I went home, I was in such a mood that I basically fell out with the wife and kids. And I was in such a mood, I couldn't snap out of it. And I had to, after saying and being quite rude, go and sit in a dark room for a bit and just be by myself. It's the first time I've ever had to do that after a football match, frankly. And I think it was down to the fact that I thought that we'd turned a corner. Fortunately, my wife is very understanding and all the rest of it. So that's fine. But yeah, it just goes to show that, you know, what's happening for me, it's actually started to affect me personally. And I said to you guys on Saturday that it's crossed my mind about whether to actually go to another game. The way it affected me on Saturday, it just affected my whole weekend. And, you know, I've spoken to a few people since then, and they said, you know, it used to happen to them. And, you know, you've got to kind of get past that stage of actually letting it affect your whole life when you get so disappointed and felt like let down. So, yeah, it's, you know, a bit of a personal angle from my point of view, but yeah, Saturday was a dreadful day for me for those reasons. And yeah, I don't know what else to say, really. I mean, things are better.
Well, you're getting some backup in the comments there. Tony's saying you need a break from it, and that's why he's swerving Tuesday night against Bristol City. That's absolutely and you know, that's the choice that everybody's got to make, and it's not necessarily a direct attempt to boycott games, but it is a general feeling amongst the fan base that, one, if you've got something better to be doing, if you normally miss something else out in your life at the expense of the football, now people are at the moment reprioritizing those kind of things. And if it's going to affect your mood and stuff, and look, all of us who are Leicester City fans, we all have at least one extremely tolerant family member or spouse who has to put up with, at the very least, us having a whinge and a moan about it, and at the very extreme cases there, John, affecting essentially your mood at that moment in time. Pete, the Norwich game was a backward step, but you could also say, let's have a look at this from Gary Rowett's point of view. You could hear in his voice after the game that he felt like he got somewhere against Stoke and Borough, and then actually after the Norwich game, you could hear in his voice the disappointment, and I think he looked like he felt a little bit let down by the players.
Yeah, I think a few, I don't know, chickens coming home to roost, maybe the same. I don't know, but a lot of people went into that game maybe not even looking at what Norwich have been doing. I was very, very impressed with Norwich. I thought Leicester were very poor. That's obvious. But I thought Norwich were really, really good and missing a lot of players. They knew exactly what to do against Leicester. They had some very, very talented players, but also players who are completely not what we want to be facing against. I thought the defense looked very tired as well. And we know that that's essentially the back four that we've got. Maybe the sales can come in. That's obviously a conversation for the when we look at Ipswich. But I thought as the second half went on, I thought they defended quite well in the first, but then as the second half went on, that's when the mistakes started to come. And I think a lot of it was down to a little bit of tiredness, as well as obvious poor play. But, you know, that's taken for it as granted. So I'm a little bit different to I think of many people on this, and you know, I am a bit of a glass half full kind of guy. But I looked at that and kind of went, right, okay, don't worry about it, because I just thought Norwich played very, very well, and it was a game where straight away we couldn't make anything, we couldn't build any chances, we couldn't make anything happen further forward. And when you've got Patson Daka up front, that's not going to happen, is it? And on a counter attack with him buzzing around, etc., trying to get on the end of through balls, then things maybe can happen. But when you're looking at trying to build movement and having one player in the box, and maybe against a pretty solid and well-drilled side, maybe a delivery into the box, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So maybe there was an element of wanting Rowett to maybe change things earlier at half-time, because we were just getting no change from Norwich. But overall, with other teams losing as well, and we've got to that stage now, I think we're all looking at what other teams are doing. It's almost a little bit of maybe no harm. Let's go on to the next game and see what happens. What I don't want to happen, and obviously a lot of Leicester fans who go to the King Power, we don't want to turn into that side who are essentially scared to play at home and maybe are better away from home. That's what we don't want. But ultimately, and I know when we're talking about football, we're talking about a preview for the next game, as long as we pick up points, don't really care whether it's at the KP or away from home, but we will need to improve. I just hope that a slightly refreshed defense will help, because they did look, they were just on their arse, weren't they, late on?
Yeah, absolutely. And the defense, when they're fresh in the first couple of minutes, are not that reliable, are they? Let alone when we're a minute from the end of time. Good evening to those of you who are joining us live. Lots of you watching along. If you want to drop your comments in, please do. Usually this preview only lasts half an hour, but we have had an awful lot to cover, and we've not actually started previewing the Ipswich game, and we have just gone over the half-hour mark. So we'll be with you for a little while longer. So if you are with us live, drop your comments in. Tom, I'll ask you from a slightly different angle about the Norwich game based on a couple of comments that we've had in. Buzzer preferring to look at a more positive angle, that Lascelles looked miles better than Okoli when he came on. I mean, I 100% agree with that. Jamal Lascelles came onto that pitch and for me looked a level above everybody else on the field. I know Norwich weren't exactly pushing as hard at that point, but he dealt with every long ball. His positioning was excellent. He won every duel. He used the ball well. I think as long as his legs and the rest of his body can carry him through the next 11 games, he needs to be in the team for as much as possible. We have to also look at the negative side of individual players. Jordan Ayew came in for an absolute battering. He's become a bit of a scapegoat. Don't get me wrong. I don't rate how he's performed in a Leicester shirt this season at all. But there's that little clip on social media of him trying to press the defender who was stuck right by his own corner flag and completely giving that up. And then the rest of the players, or the majority of them at least, giving a half-hearted attempt at applauding the handful of fans that were left in the stands at the end of the game, and Ayew just trudging off like a petulant toddler. So what are your sort of takeaways from that game, but specifically sort of player-wise? Is there anybody you think that covered themselves, not necessarily in glory, but showed something there in an overall bad team performance? And what's your thoughts on Jordan Ayew?
The thing about that clip where he's trudging off that winds me up the most is the fact that because it's the back of him and he's wearing the number 9, and you know who wore that number 9 before he did, and you're thinking, the comparison's just sitting in your mind and thinking, what are you doing? Where's the effort? Where's the passion? Where's the press? Where's the aggression, the anger, all of it? Jordan Ayew cannot stay on his feet, and he's fast becoming probably my most disliked current player in the squad at the minute. Now that FaZe is shipped off to Monaco. Look, the game itself was deeply frustrating. I have had similar experiences to what Jono's experienced in the past, and this season for me, there's been a level of just putting the results and everything at arm's distance and not allowing it to affect my weekend the way it used to. And I think when we spoke about the protests before, there was a whole conversation pre-match around, well, are the protests going to affect the players, and is that energy going to be brought into the stadium in a negative way? And I think the crowd did their job. I think they were brilliant. I think they said what they needed to say outside the ground, if you agree with it. And once they were in the stadium, I think they were up for it, and they were backing the players. And again, these players are the professionals in this instance. They're the ones that should be turning up, raring to go. And if they get our support, even better. And we should be supporting them. But it's up for them to be able to get off their own backsides and start actually playing football to a level that we can get behind and that's befitting to wear the shirt. Norwich played well. There's no getting around it. And I think Lascelles instantly boosted that back line. But Norwich were light. They had plenty of injuries. I think they had something like 14 injuries or something ridiculous to their squad. It was a huge amount, but they are top of the form guide. And if the league table was to start since January, they'd be at the very top. So they're a very good side. They know what they're doing. I think Gary Rowett, I think he's done really well considering the cards he's been dealt. It was a really disappointing result. I think we were all up for it. We're all predicting, 2-0, 3-0. I'll hold my hand up and say any sniff of optimism and hope I was ready to jump on. And that just says so much more about this season, that after 2 draws, we're ready to believe. Hopefully this is the light peeking through the crack. But it was a poor performance, and I think Ayew typified that. There weren't a lot of players for me that covered themselves in glory. I want to be a half glass full fan like Pete is, or should I say half shoey full, but I'm just not seeing it at the minute, and I do fear the worst. But I would say to all the fans like myself and Jono that feel it, we've got to care without caring so much, if that makes sense. We've got to find that way. There it is.
Pete's glass is empty. The glass is empty. Let's just have a quick look at a couple more comments before we do finally start to look ahead to this weekend. Ragman DC saying, why do we put Ayew on the pitch? Yeah, very good question. And this is a guy who's the captain of his country, has played hundreds of appearances for Crystal Palace in the Premier League. Somebody who should be at least looking like he's trying. Michael kind of contrasting things, saying we didn't lose because of any one player. We're not necessarily saying that. We're not saying Jordan Ayew is to blame for Leicester losing to Norwich. We're just saying Jordan Ayew is kind of typifying what, or is being the channel that people are using to vent a lot of their frustration. So that's why he is, as Tony says now, the pantomime villain. Absolutely. Now, we need, statistically speaking, if you look for foxsake.news, an article I published today, I'd crunched some more numbers. I've never been as into numbers and stats since until we launched this website a couple of months ago. I know. I'd never used. I used to think, oh, all a load of rubbish. But I thought, you know what? I personally, and maybe I've just completely avoided it because I've said many a times on the show, I don't really have that much of an interest in Championship football. So maybe it was just something that wasn't in my brain. But everybody knows the magic number to stay in the Premier League is 40 points. Nobody's ever been relegated with 40 points. So I decided, because we're in this horrific situation now, to have a look at what the sort of maths was behind how many points Leicester might need to stay up. And the reality is, on average, in the last 10 years, the point I worked out the average is 45.3 points. Okay. Yes, some of the time you needed more than that, some of you needed less. That's what an average is. People look at me being all statistical these days. So that would mean that Leicester then need 11 points from 11 games to be in with a reasonable mathematical chance of survival, a point per game. And if you go to forfoxsake.news, have a look at the article. I've looked at every single fixture between now and the end of the season, where those points could be. And by my mystic meg calculations, is going to come down to the last game of the season against Blackburn, where we're going to need all 3 points to get those 11. That's, it's obviously not going to happen. If it does, then I should have put some kind of bet on. I should have spoken to my friend Pete Selby and got the right odds for that kind of prediction. But so that's the situation that we're in, and I have I've backed us in that article to get a point away at Ipswich, and that's mainly because we got a point against Borough and they're second. Ipswich are third. They're 3 points behind Borough. They've got a game in hand and better goal difference. So they're ultimately very similar to Borough. And yes, we played Borough when they were a little bit flatter in terms of form, but we've proven over the last couple of away games that we can go. And maybe it's a case of pressure off because you're away from home. Maybe it's a case of raise your game because you're against one of the division's better sides. So let's go to Jono. Jono, do you agree with my faint optimism that we might be in for another decent, hard-fought away point on Saturday?
That's what I'm going for. I don't think we've got enough to win the game. I'm hoping that we have a replay of the Borough match, to be honest, and get a hard-fought, well-earned point away from home against a good team. That's I think the best I can hope for at the moment. I don't think I can predict us to win. I think it'd be daft to do that at the moment. But realistically, I think I don't know whether we'll get anything. Ipswich are at the top of the league and really gunning for either the playoffs or automatics. So they've got something to play for. I know we have as well, but we haven't shown any iota of wanting to play at all. So I think the best we can hope for is maybe a 1-1. But I fear the worst, frankly, at this point.
Not so much optimism then from Jono. Pete, we're going away to another very good side in the division, a side that came down with us last season, a side that we were hoping to be somewhere near this season and are absolutely miles away from. But I guess the good news is that Jordan James is available to play some minutes. Those minutes will need to be managed. But if we're talking, and we mentioned Lascelles earlier, if we're talking about players that are going to be pivotal to our survival prospects, Jamal Lascelles and Jordan James are in the top two for me. Can you see Rowett starting James on Saturday, or maybe doing what he did against Norwich and bring him on midway through the second half just to make sure he's managed? Because we've got to remember there's a game on Tuesday night against Bristol City as well.
Well, first of all, you certainly hope that Lascelles is fit enough to be pivotable, because I think he's going to have to be running back towards his own goal a fair few times.
Pivotable, I like it.
It's I think I've just come up with a new term there. There you go. Write that down, sports fans. I think that they'll be looking, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth there, Rob, with Bristol City. That's the game. I'm very strong on this game at the weekend. Very, very strong. I think we're going to get smashed. I think we're going to get beaten quite badly. They're the one team in this league right now, apart from maybe a late away game at Coventry, looking for a win to maybe win the league. That I really dread. They've got pace, they've got power, they've got height. They've got a game in hand and 3 points behind Middlesbrough. They're gunning for automatic promotion. And I just look at the way that they set up and what they have in their starting lineup and how they've played recently, and it's everything you do not want in a side facing this Leicester City side. So I would be amazed if they play from the start. So it may be something to come on and get fully fit for a start then against Bristol City, because I think that will be the most important game. And what you would naturally feel is that a player like James would probably still come on rather than manage his minutes from the start with a view to then starting against Bristol City. That's what I would think. With Lascelles, it might be slightly different. It could be a case of you could then give Lascelles, say, look, here's an hour. Let's see what you like maybe at half time. And then someone like a Coley who looks like he needs rest, he can then maybe come on for the last half hour, etc. Something along those lines. I think that's a lot more manageable than maybe a midfielder. But overall in the game, I think we're in for a bit of a hiding, sports fans. And then we will move on to Bristol City at home, and hopefully against a side who are battling for the playoffs, where you can then bounce back, because I really do fear, especially if they score first as well. And if they score first, it may be through Hurst. There's a few players who might bite us on the backside, a side we've had a lot of dealings with over the years in the transfer window. I've got a few lined up if you want them, but yeah, I fear the worst this weekend. I'm going nowhere near a Leicester win, and I'm going nowhere near a point, unfortunately. That glass, as I said earlier, is half full. It's not, it's empty now. So I'm definitely going for a home win, and if they score first, it could be by a fair few, let's say.
Pete, you and I started For Fox's Sake over 11 years ago, and I think this, I can count on one hand the amount of times that you have predicted a Leicester City loss. This is, we're in a serious situation here. To those of you that have been with us from the very beginning, I know you'll be thinking exactly the same. If Pete Selby's predicting a Leicester defeat, we might as well not bother. And I think I kind of take your point, and I'll get Tom's thoughts on this. Is it kind of a case of the Ipswich game on Saturday almost write it off, in the sense that don't get your key players injured, don't worry too much about trying to get anything from it, because you've got Bristol City and QPR coming up next week, and next week is way more important than what you can do against a team that is probably going to sneak in to get an instant bounce back to the Premier League. Obviously, you have to turn up and play the game, and there might be repercussions if you don't approach it in the right way, in the sense that the players' confidence takes even more of a dent, and their sort of mental fortitude becomes even less apparent, and they become even more fragile than they currently are. But you know, you said yourself, Tom, that you're trying to keep results and things at arm's length, and you said you'd almost put Norwich out of your brain before we managed to regurgitate it all for you this evening. You're welcome. But is it almost a case of this game on Saturday's not even happened yet, and you're already trying to park it out the way and look forward to next week?
Wow, man. Look, can I make a case for the defense against what Pete's just laid out? Because it does sound pretty grim. I think we need to, well, we are going to turn up and have a go. What can I say about our current situation? It's Jekyll and Hyde. When we played Middlesbrough, we looked quite good. You know, they're right up there. We can mix it. There is quality in this squad when they decide to actually put in the hard work and application. Perhaps, you know, something could happen, but I do struggle to see a positive result. Maybe a 1-1, like Tony's dropped below. Could be something we could clutch at, but yeah, it does look grim. I think Lascelles changes the equation slightly, and I think Okoli being outside of the squad, or at least the starting lineup, could bode quite well. JJ's return, we have to admit, does change things as well. Where he slots in and who for, that's an interesting conversation. But he is class, and you get the sense that between maybe Devine, JJ, and Lascelles, we might be able to start to build around those three and some of the others if they want to put in a performance as well, because they are capable. It could be a worldie outside the box that swings it in our favor at some point. So there are moments there that we could cling to, but I do think it is going to be a very tough match, and I'm probably not game enough or bold enough to predict a win.
There is one thing, Rob. Yeah. It's interesting because for the best part of probably about 2 months now, we've been saying about a back three, etc. And we've been talking about the defense and how that defense would be able to play in a back three. Essentially, it would suit the likes of a returning suitor when he's fit. It would have Lascelles in the centre, or maybe a Vestergaard in centre, Lascelles one side, and it really does suit what we would normally have. And obviously, because we've had an injury crisis at the back, we've not been able to essentially try that out under Rowett. But you could very much argue that obviously with Lascelles returning, that would boost the chance of doing that. But you could very much say that James returning would also help, because if you do want to play him in midfield, all of a sudden that midfield looks rather nice when you've got James coming in alongside a Winks and Skip. And then when you look further forward, the case has been, well, who's going to be the other forward? And Macasser's shown that he can play in that link role. And of course, that would make it a little bit more defensive, because you've got essentially an attacking midfielder playing as that second striker, and then you can leave Daka right up front, hustling and harrying. So all of a sudden, against an Ipswich side away from home, a back three does look rather nice, because again, the fullbacks would be the wing backs, not a problem. You could easily then go back into a 5 and slot back into a pretty solid defensive formation. And then going forward, we've seen in recent weeks a little bit more from Ricardo going forward, especially at Borough. So it's almost like the returning midfielder gives them more of an option for a back three than actually anything to do with the defence itself.
Yeah, interesting point. And Buzzers kind of jumped on that and said I'd play a back three of Nelson, Lascelles, and Vestergaard. No Vestergaard at the moment. You'd have to play a Coley at this stage if you were playing a back three. My question in sort of response to that would be, who do you play in the wing back roles? Because if you are playing Luke Thomas and Ricardo Pereira as your wing backs, then Fatawu doesn't get in that side, because you've got a midfield three, and then you've got the two up front in Macasser and Daka. Buzzer's saying possibly use Skip as an inverted left back, and then in possession he steps inside to make a midfield 4 with Macasser at the top of that. You probably have Winks at the base of it, Skip coming in off the left, James coming, and James has played kind of right side of that midfield under Cifuentes, not out wide right, but in that sort of inside right channel. It's an interesting one, and you know, we spoke on
Fatawu would be on the bench as well. That's the thing. Fatawu would just be on the bench, and if you're in the game, what a guy to come on for the last half an hour or so.
And he wasn't great against Norwich. And you could also maybe look at the fact that you could, if Daka's legs are gone after 60, 65 minutes, you could even chuck Fatawu up there, because I think fans would rather see him go through the middle than Jordan Ayew. But we spoke to on for Fox's Sake.news when Gary Rowett was appointed, which bizarrely was only a couple of weeks ago. It feels like forever. And we spoke to reporters from both Oxford United and Birmingham City, his last couple of jobs, and they said he basically doesn't ever deviate from 4-2-3-1. And I think it would be a big risk for him to choose to do that with I don't think he's going to do it on Saturday. Then you'd be doing it with 10 games remaining to try and save Leicester's championship status. I agree with the sort of thinking behind it, but I personally am not that convinced that Gary Rowett is going to make a step that bold, given the fact that he's not had a huge amount of time on the training ground and that shape. And again, I only ever talk in my personal playing experience. I was very much an amateur footballer. I'm not sitting here saying I was any good, but the shape of playing three centre backs does require a lot of work in terms of thinking about who's where, whose job is this space, whose job is that man, what does it look like in and out of possession, how does it affect the height of the defensive line in terms of how quickly we push out, what position in that. So I think if you wanted to run that, you would probably want a pre-season behind you, not coming into a team that is already struggling defensively to try and change things for the last 10 games. It is something that we'll look at over the next couple of games and previews and podcasts if it starts to sort of maybe take shape, even if it takes shape later in a game when we're trying to get more bodies forward. But I am conscious of the fact that we are running well over our usual time. Again, we're blaming Pete. If you didn't tune in at the start, Pete decided to go out for pizza in Milan rather than doing a podcast on all the stuff that we had to cover at the beginning of the show. So, and look, he's been in Italy a few days and he's got the accent already.
Well, we get a clean sheet with that pizza?
Well, you do yourself down. You do yourself down, Rob, because you're a good player. You were a young Terry Butcher when I played. I was more of a Pat Butcher, but there you go. It doesn't matter. You were all right. You're all right.
Let's get predictions in before we wrap up. Those of you that have been watching live, and there are again lots of you, thank you very much. Drop your predictions in. You've got a minute or two while we go around the studio here to decide. Jono and Pete have already hinted at things. They may or may not change their mind in the next couple of minutes. But let's have a score line and any key events you think are going to happen. Any Leicester players that are going to stand out. Any Leicester players going to score, maybe, if we do get on the score sheet. Interesting one, just to maybe plant a seed of thought just while the predictions start coming in. On my preview article, which will be live on forfoxsake.news within the next hour this evening, I've had a look. Stats again. I'm getting really stuck into them. Leicester have got the second worst defense in the league, behind only Sheffield Wednesday. Nice. Average concession of 1.6 goals per game, which isn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be when I worked that out. Ipswich have got the second best goal scoring record in the division this season, averaging 1.77 goals per game. So in fact, I'll kick off the prediction round then. Based on those numbers, I think it is going to be a 2-2 thriller. I just can't bring myself to predict that Leicester are going to lose, so I'm going 2-2. Jono, let's come to you. Are you still on for a 1-1? You're on mute. That's what you are on.
Sorry. Here we go. Yeah. It paints a bleak picture what you just said, and I think that it will follow in that suit. So I think it will be 3-1 to Ipswich. I think we'll put in a display for about 20 minutes, but ultimately we'll concede some sloppy goals and continue as we were, to be honest. So I'm going for a defeat, which is the first time I think I've ever said that.
And it's worse than about 10 minutes ago when you were talking about a 1-1. Leicester have conceded two more goals in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's the best we can hope for, but I don't think it'll happen. I think we'll lose 3-1. And I think you're right. I think we've got to be looking at the Bristol City there on to start picking up the wins that we need. We need 4 wins, don't we, from the last 10 or 11 games. Yeah. It's doable still, but yeah, I don't think this is the time.
So optimistic Jono saying 1-1, but realistic Jono saying 3-1 Ipswich. Pete, I saw you counting on your hands there. Have you got enough fingers to count how many goals you think Ipswich are going to put past us on Saturday?
A very, very confused Italian lady at the door earlier. She knocked on the door and she said, housekeeping. And I said, what's that? So I opened the door and she goes, what's this? And she turns around and she goes, would you like a clean sheet? I said, I would. It's been ages. It's been weeks, months. We've gone almost a club record. And she stood there. She had no idea what I was talking about. I said, come on. So yeah, I would, but no, it's not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen in a million years. I got to 4. I think we will score, and I hope Leicester really take it to Ipswich at the start. You get a goal early, get in front, take it to them, because you know that they're just going to wave after wave of attack after their win against Hull. What a big win for them in their promotion campaign. So we should be on the front foot. I think if we sit back and try and hold it, it's just not going to be the case, is it? You know what I mean? So I'm going to go. How many times have we been away at Man City, Rob, and all sorts, and away at Arsenal, and we've gone for a Leicester win, and we've been right, or we've gone for a draw? But it's got to be one of only a handful that I've gone for a defeat. I can't see it, and I just think if they score early, they're going to go. It's going to be. I'm going 4-1.
4-1. Jono's gone 3-1. Pete's gone 4-1. Let's just have a quick look at the comments before we get Tom's prediction. Buzzer saying 2-1 to Ipswich. Michael saying 2-1 to Ipswich. Buzzer also saying all these stats just for us to win 3-0 and keep a clean sheet. And it's taken 55 minutes of the podcast. This must be a new record. 55 minutes until the clean sheet klaxon has sounded. And it comes firstly courtesy of a terrible Pete Selby joke. And then secondly, with Buzzer saying that I've got all my stats out just to have them completely blown out of the water. Tom finishes off with your prediction. I've gone for 2-2. Jono's gone for 3-1. Pete's gone for 4-1 Ipswich. What have you got for us?
Well, I don't think the cleaning ladies come around here to see me, so it's definitely not happening. But I think it's going to be 1-1. What I'm really interested in this is to see what Gary does. And I want to see how quickly he's learning about the squad, about who's included, and about the formation. If he's not going to move away from 4-2-3-1, and if we've seen Ayew trudging off the pitch from Norwich, I really want to know what he's going to do, particularly when Daka comes off. So that's what I'm looking out for.
So me and you are going for a draw. Jono and Pete are going for an Ipswich win. Let's hope then that has some kind of reverse manifesting effect, and that by none of us predicting Leicester to win, it might actually happen. Like Buzzer says, 3-0 and a clean sheet. Can you imagine? Thank you to everybody that's watched along this evening. Sorry to have spent more time with us on a Thursday evening than you usually do here on the preview. But as ever, if you are looking for any reaction from the For Fox's Sake team as to the latest news and developments at Leicester City, forfoxsake.news is the website. Just £5 a month to subscribe, or £50 for the entire year, giving you 2 months completely free of charge. We do occasionally put the odd free article out as well. There's loads of stuff on there. Yes, reaction to everything that happens on a daily basis at Leicester and Leicester City women's team as well. But there are plenty of historical pieces on there and feature pieces like where are they now, that kind of thing, and deeper dives into various elements, including the restructure at the top, the appointment of the new manager 3 times this season, lots and lots of stuff on there. So for foxsake.news for that, we do appreciate your support. What it does also mean is that we can continue to bring you these podcasts and shows completely free of charge. We also have fan pieces on there. John has written one. Tom, have you been tapped up for one yet? You must be. Oh, get right.
I got some thoughts.
Oh, if you can bring yourself to do it, we'll get you on there as well. And anybody else, if you're watching along and you think I fancy writing a fan-based, my thoughts on what's happening at Leicester City or a particular area of it, just get in touch with us. You can find out how to do that at www.forfoxsake.news. We want to involve as many of you as we can. Now, we're not predicting a win for Leicester on Saturday, but hopefully that means the opposite will absolutely happen. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll speak to you again soon.